Good morning to one and all, and I would like to start by thanking Michael Jones for inviting me to participate in this BlueTech Week, Craig McLean and Noah for making it possible. Thanks a lot. Margaret, our host, Scripps Institution of Oceanography, and should say this at the end of the keynote speech, but thank you for your patience before you get asleep. Having said that, now I have to find out where my presentation is. Because I have a different one. Yep. Let's see. Oh, okay, keynote speech. Well, that was easy. There I am. So, I must confess in my compulsive obsessive disorder that is reading. I'm a compulsive reader. So a couple of weeks ago, I was reading this. I apologize for the French, but it says the Gulf Stream runs at the speed of about 8 kilometers an hour. And as we might have noticed, if the speed and direction does modify, the European climate will be subject to perturbations, modifications that we won't be able to calculate. The consequences we will not be able to calculate. This is not part of the IPCC report on oceans and cryosphere in climate change, a report that was released 2 weeks ago. As a matter of fact, it's part of Jules Verne, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, 1869. So it seems we need to improve our communication skills. A lot of people know Jules Verne and 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Most of them remember Captain Nemo and the submarine, the Nautilus. Few of them remember the description Jules Verne made of flora, the fauna, and topography of all oceans, and the fact that he and his crew were able to live out of the ocean without having contact with society. And 150 years later, we're finding out that, okay, the ocean is playing an important role in our life. So what did that happen? If we go to observations, and I got this from World Ocean Database and the holdings at NOAA data center, from 1771 to 2019. So the blue line means that between 1771 and 1899, they are holding 100,000 observations. Then we have the orange box from 1900 to 1970. They have 3 million observations. 1971 to 1980, the International Decade of Ocean Exploration. So we have 1.7 million in 1 decade observations. From 1981 to 2019, 11.8 million. So you would say, okay, you look at maps and, oh, we had covered the whole world. There's nothing else to discover. Only if you note the size of each one of those dots, it's probably the size of, it's bigger than Switzerland, it's bigger than Connecticut. So that's not real. There's still a lot of things we need to know about the ocean and the interaction of the ocean with the rest of the Earth system. So technology, and we have businesses here, has changed our life. Throughout the history, going to the first truly global oceanographic research cruise, the HMS Challenger, back in the 1870s, throughout 3.5 years, they collected 263 profiles. Back in 1990s, World Ocean Circulation Experiment, throughout 7 years, we got 10,000 profiles. Nowadays, with Argo, in a month, we have about 13,000 profiles. So one of the questions is, what's going to happen in 2030, 10 years from now? And this creates a lot of things, opportunities and challenges. And now we need to manage a lot of data, and we'll get to that point. But the thing is that, as I said, technology changed our lives. Some of you have already seen this slide. But we have passed, in a matter of a few decades, from exploring to understanding to predicting what's happening in the ocean. We came from the times of mechanical instruments, and by going to reverse engineering, we're able to duplicate that and have our own equipment, sampling equipment. And we were used to delayed mode access to data. We were able to wait a year or two to get results. That was not a problem. But then we moved into high resolution and near real time. And we found out that there were processes that we didn't know before. We no longer kept the idea of standard depths for our samples. Now we had information in near real time. But then we came to autonomous vehicles and unmanned vehicles, better computing capabilities and models, real-time data, big data. Now we have to handle that. And now we buy equipment and we have a problem. Normally we just pack it back and send it back to the factory so they can fix it. And we have the Internet of Things, and now we can do many things from our office. We pass from finding to knowledge, and now we are at the point where we are providing advice, our best knowledge to policy and decision making and to society. And those are the roles we have to play now. As I mentioned, 1971, 1980 was the International Decade of Ocean Exploration. And you can see in the right-hand side of this image, IDOE was a brainchild of the National Council of Marine Resources and Engineering, and following the Marine Sciences Act of 1966. And it was supported by the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission and by the UN General Assembly. Objectives back 50 years ago of this decade: preserve the ocean environment, improve environmental forecasting, expand seabed assessment activities, develop ocean monitoring systems, improve worldwide data exchange, and increase opportunities for international sharing of responsibilities and costs for ocean exploration. That was back then. So this is part of an anecdote, but a few years back, we had this IOC's officers meeting, and we had a former executive secretary, Gunnar Kullenberg, and he mentioned, okay, you know, we're almost 50 years from the first decade of ocean exploration. He said that was 1971, 1980. So we said, okay, 1971 plus 50, it's 2021, 10 years, 2021, 2030, 2030 agenda. Okay, we can do something. But we already have an ocean exploration decade. We have to do something different. Yeah, what can we do now? It was UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. So it's no longer science for the sake of science itself, but now we are demonstrating the societal impact of what we are doing, and we aim to providing answers to the problems we have already identified. So that's part of the challenge now. If you go back to parts of what the IPCC report said on oceans and cryosphere, but this will not come to a surprise to many of you, we know the uptake and redistribution of CO2 and heat by the ocean has changed. We are having problems and issues with plastics, with deoxygenation, with pharmaceuticals in our oceans, in our coasts. Oceans and cryosphere are having changes that are pervasive. We're reaching thresholds of abrupt change and long-term changes that cannot be avoided, plus the possibility of irreversibility. And last but not least, long response times imply long-term changes. And we know that the ocean has long response times. So we need to get used to it. We need to adapt. We need to mitigate. And we can do that only if we have knowledge, if we have data. And for that, we need technology. And for that, we need to partner. And one of our partners is you, the BlueTech community. And on top of that, we have this benefit, an opportunity. Now we are talking about the 2030 agenda. And the base of it is SDG 14, oceans. You can say 15, life on land, 13, climate action, clean water, SDG 6. And from there, we start building up. The opportunity we have is to complete this chain value from data and the observation through research, development, and innovation throughout the society. And you will hear more details about this, but the panel on the right are the 6 main societal outcomes we are expecting from the decade. It's a clean ocean, it's a safe ocean for coastal and offshore operations, and of course for people living near the coasts, a healthy and resilient ocean. An ocean that is sustainable and productive, predicted, so we know how it was, how it is, how it can be, but people understand also what the changes might be, so they are able to adapt. And accessible and transparent, so we can have access to data and information and know how to use it. And that's the idea behind this UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. But if you look at it, the key drivers are, and coming back from the experience we have, we need to further develop observations and technology. We need to develop further modeling tools. I've just included an arrow into ocean mapping. If we look only at the bottom topography, you can see that nowadays we have probably about 16% coverage in adequate or higher resolution of our seabed topography. But when we talk about the ocean mapping, now we need to think about the 3 dimensions. And we need to include the water column into that mapping, so we understand the whole environment. We need to go to transdisciplinary and integrated marine scientific research. And it is true that we tend to separate things into silos. And that's why we have a traumatologist and a neurosurgeon and such and such. And the same happens everywhere. It's our own inability to grasp the whole problem as a whole. But we need to work in transdisciplinary research. And not only through natural sciences, but we need to include social sciences and human sciences into this. We need to work on capacity development and the transfer of marine technology. And transfer of marine technology, in this case, is not transferring equipment. It's wider than that. It's having access to experts, to expertise, to models, to software, to hardware. It's a huge universe. It's not just giving away a piece of equipment and we are done. And communication and awareness. And that includes social literacy, and probably we can solve the problem we've been dragging with since 1869 and Jules Verne. So why is it if we're saying it, no one is listening? Probably because we are not saying it properly. As for the main research and development priority areas at this point in time, because this is work that is being done by the Executive Planning Group and in consultations with the different regions, we can think about a comprehensive map of the ocean, the 3 dimensions, 3D, working further into the observing system, because we need the data. We need to manage ocean data and information systems and making it available and accessible. We need to work with ocean ecosystems and understand the services they are providing. We need to improve our disaster risk reduction systems. They have to be comprehensive. We need to understand that the ocean is part of the Earth system, or the Earth system to understand that the ocean is part of that system. And finally, we need to work, as I said, in capacity development, technology transfer, and ocean literacy. But these are initial ideas. And part of today's challenge for all of us is to see, is there something missing? Are we leaving someone behind? Are we making the most out of this opportunity? This opportunity. What we think is where we are. We are at the point where science is largely competent for problems diagnostics. We would like to have science providing solutions and motivations for action. We have an observing system for climate and emerging data services. We should have an ocean data system for past, present, and future. We have major knowledge gaps and weak ocean literacy. And I have another anecdote here. A couple of years back when I was IOC Vice Chair for Latin America and the Caribbean, I was having this officers meeting. So I sent the agenda to all the contact points of all 35 countries in my region. Is there anything you would like me to bring forward to the Board of Officers? And I got a response from one country in Central America. It says, okay, we are truly concerned about the alarming rate of drownings in our beaches, and IOC should do something about that. And my first reaction was, they don't know what they do with what we do. They didn't understand the question. Then I thought it further, and I went to the meeting, and actually it was the same meeting when we started with the Ocean Decade. It was in Gilleleje, Denmark. He says, you know what, guys, I've done this, this, and that, and I received this answer. And my colleagues have started laughing. He says, I had exactly the same reaction. And then I pictured, okay, these guys don't know about rip currents. And that's our responsibility. We know about that. And a simple sign on the beach saying, be aware that you can find rip currents here. And if you're in that case, just try to swim parallel to the coast. Just a couple of meters that way, and you will be able to come back. And that's part of ocean literacy. And we need to move, because you have signs for tsunamis, and you have signs for hurricanes, and in some countries you have signs for rip currents. But in some countries we don't. And so we need to move from major knowledge gaps and weak ocean literacy into ocean literate and well-informed decisions. And those well-informed decisions will be based in good data, authoritative opinions, the best available scientific knowledge. And for that, we need the help of the best technology, equipment, IT technology, you name it. Funding based mostly in research mode. We need to demonstrate a clear value chain leading to resourcing and commitment. And finally, from a hugely uneven capacity, especially in developing countries and small island developing states, into a capacity development transfer of marine technology where we are leaving no one behind. And those are ideals, but we need ideals. So this was, part of this was in a presentation yesterday by Chris. Okay, we look at this Ocean Economy Report back in 2015, and it says that gross marine product of the ocean is $2.5 trillion US, and 70% of that depends on a clean ocean. So the question is, if we're talking about the 7th largest world economy, how is it that we're investing so little in it? Or look at the other, from a different angle. You're in a business that is involved in a $2.5 trillion US gross marine product per year. So those are opportunities for business. So we can think about, if we go to late 60s, a triangle, the Sabatus triangle, with government, academia, and business. You have the triple helix. We were talking about that yesterday. We can add a 4th dimension with citizens and have a quadruple helix. But the thing is, how do we work together? And this is a two-way avenue. So we have the questions. We know what we like to look at. You are the ones in development and innovation. Do we know what you can do? Do you know what we are needing? And then there's some things that will come up through this common work. In the end, what's involved? We are talking about life. We are talking about ecosystem services. We're talking about environment, property, jobs, income, tax revenue, things that we already did. Even today, we don't know that it will come because we're not paying attention. So we go from fisheries, transport, aquaculture, observations, clean energy, defense, you name it. And even the conditions we are creating with the impact of our own actions on the ocean in all these different dimensions. So the challenge, we are in need of profound transformations. We cannot continue business as usual. We need robust assessments, and those depend on all available scientific knowledge, observations, models, synthesis, traditional knowledge, research, development, and innovation. Capacity development and ocean literacy work as enablers for action, for mitigation and adaptation. And we need accelerated transfer of marine technology, and remember, it's a huge dimension and it's a different universe. When you see transfer of marine technology, is not just giving away a piece of equipment, it's more than that. In any case, what is required? In terms of the decade, we need governance, we need resources, we need commitment and ownership. Unless we believe it's our decade, it won't happen. And we need actions. Not just words, actions. We need to propose actions, concrete things. What is expected from us all? Boldness and creativity. Long-term thinking, but identifying benchmarks. It's not just wishful thinking. We need to be oriented towards solutions. We need to be proactive. We need to develop ownership, commitment, synergies. We need to be drivers of sustainable development, and we need to be drivers of technological development. And as we are standing here this BlueTech week, we are in a unique position for this synergy. We can work together. This is the pop quiz question of the day. Do you know in which decade we are nowadays, 2019? I mentioned this to a couple person last night, so you don't count. I was checking this this week. We're in the middle of 10 different UN decades. 2 of them will end next year. 2 more will start the following year. So on average, 10 different decades at the same time. But why are we in a unique position? Because people are talking about the oceans. We have a standalone SDG. Within the UN Framework on Climate Change Convention, they're talking about a blue conference of parties 2 weeks from now, COP25, because they realized that the oceans are playing a fundamental role in climate. We have the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. We are under the limelight. So we have a unique opportunity, and for us, and I assume that for our distinguished members of the Executive Planning Group for the decade, having you here gives us a unique opportunity also to ask you, how can we achieve this together? How do you think we need to move forward? Because we are looking at the science part of it. We think we know some of the problems we have and some of the questions we need to answer and some of the solutions we would like to give. But from the technology part and the development and innovation, then how do we interact? How do we communicate? How do we make the best out of it? Because we will be receiving your developments, and we will be making money out of this, because you're in the business. And that's good. We're in a unique position. You're putting together both things. So, there's a phrase coined several years back. We were looking for the ocean we need for the future we want. At IOC, the Executive Planning Group, they're thinking of the science we need for the ocean we want. And we would like you to join us in this venture. It's not an IOC decade. It's our decade. Decade of the UN Oceans. Decade of the Oceans for Sustainable Development. Thank you very much.